I call Fletcher Tabato.
Thank you, sir. It's my pleasure to rise on behalf of New Zealand First to support the Taxation Transformation First Phase Simplification and other measures bill. I'd just like to thank Mr Bishop. I did always, well, you know, always, that's a hard, big term, but I listened intently to Mr Bishop's contribution. He's got quite a background, you know. He's a knowledgeable young man. So I just have to say he's kind of not standing up and stepping up to his usual standard. He was only slightly above par with Mr Bennett, and that is a slow hurdle, a low hurdle to jump over. So, you know, Mr Bishop, next time. Mr Bennett took the opportunity to attack the opposition parties, and he put the question mark out there about capital gains tax. And I just put it to him and to the National Party that you already have a capital gains tax. Right. It's based on intent, and you choose not to enforce it or empower the IRD to do their job properly. Hence the mangled attempt at a clean-up that was called the Bright Line, which made the legislation even worse. And we had some good contributions from this side of the House outlining how that actually complicated, made the tax system more opaque and more difficult to deal with. The Minister got up and spoke about removing obstacles to reform. It's kind of half the story. Actually, what he's doing is picking on people who have student loans, and he's picking on people without fixed abodes, which seems to be becoming more and more of a problem, especially in Auckland, but definitely around the whole country at the moment, sir. And it seems that this government will let the problem grow and continue to grow into the future. So empowering the IRD to bill people without actually advising them and breaching their human rights is probably, in National's eyes, a great way to go about trying to get those few pennies and the pound of flesh owed by New Zealanders. And he spoke about the IT upgrade. It's quite amazing to describe nearly $1 billion of spend on an IT upgrade as core infrastructure spend in the budget. It's bordering on misleading. It's an interesting use of phraseology and terminology. People would think that huge sum of money, what was it, $2.2 or $2.8 billion, was about investing in the infrastructure of New Zealand. Actually, what we see from the past was that Mr Cosgrove spoke eloquently about Mr Dunn's contributions as one of the longest-serving revenue ministers, but under Mr Macleay's watch, we had a supposed $35 million budgeted spend, ballooning out to about 87, Mr Speaker, and there were huge concerns around that. That was a blowout of the budget. I mean, it's more than double, for goodness sake. So for the Minister to stand up and talk about nearly $1 billion of expenditure on an IT upgrade, God, he put Dr Evil to shame. So we acknowledge as a party, which is primarily the need for the reasoning for our support tonight, the need to upgrade the technology of the Inland Revenue Department. So we agree that the technology required is a necessity. There is a requirement for IRD to upgrade their IT infrastructure in order to facilitate better communications in two directions with the New Zealand taxpayer. And so we need to get into that space. And finally, for goodness sake, the commentary for New Zealand business on this legislation, more about the time it's taken to get to the House, has been unbelievable and quite derogatory of this national government. It's taken way too long, Mr Speaker. It's taken 8 years too long to get here. So, for example, biometric scanning and things like that, so you can ring up and tell them who you are on the phone, and under this legislation, that's okay. And it is okay. We've seen banks especially lead the way there, showing us that there can be security of content and some security for users and the IRD that, yep, the integrity of that system is in place. What beggars belief, and I think this is the main attack on the the government's slow moves forward is the need for simply allowing businesses and individuals to communicate and do business with the IRD using email. We're only, I say we, the national government is only legislating for this now. It's just unbelievable, sir. So now the legislation allows for example, I use an accountant, and I can say to the IRD, you can communicate with my accountant using email, and that is a reasonable form of communication. It doesn't have to be in writing. We don't need the signatures at the bottom. Let's facilitate meaningful communication in a fast and expedited manner. Let's get the business done, basically. So what I do want to touch on, though, is, and I alluded to it before, I think there was about 500 student loan cases where the government can't track these people down in Australia. So they're doing this, this two-way communication strategy with the Australian tax departments, saying we need your help. We need to track down these student loan dodgers who aren't paying their loans back. And so we had a discussion about this in caucus, and the fundamental thinking here is, yes, fair enough. If you've got a student loan, you use the New Zealand education system, you need to pay that back. But what we see here is the ideology and the focus of this government. It's so misdirected. The other case was, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm sure I'll be corrected by the other side of the House if I get this wrong. There are about 174 cases that the IRD provided to the Select Committee when they identified the need to bill the employer for tax commitments of their employees because they simply can't find the employees, they can't track them down, they can't serve them notice in writing either through a physical address. So they're going to do it for the employer. We were told this was a breach of human rights, but they're going to do it anyway for 174 cases. It just beggars belief, and it paints a picture of where this government is getting it so fundamentally wrong, Mr. Speaker. This is their priority list. 500 Kiwis in Aussie who aren't paying their student loans. Yes, we should get them. And 174 people who don't have a fixed abode and IRD can't track them down. So I want to bring it to the attention of this national government that there were many instances where IRD's time could have been so much better spent in terms of digging in to the big businesses who are avoiding their tax contributions, those who are using not New Zealand necessarily as a tax haven, but overseas tax havens, and actually getting in there and communicating with not just Australia, but other overseas jurisdictions to make meaningful changes. The numbers are amazing when put into perspective, sir. I think we're talking about a $700,000 tax take with the focus of this policy, this legislation, versus 100 times that number of $7 billion if we actually chase the corporate elite. But this absolutely goes against what this government believes in and what they're trying to achieve. For the practical solutions that this legislation offers, New Zealand First will support the bill, and we hope the government sees that they're missing out on huge opportunities in terms of tax, compliance and fairness as we move into the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call Alistair Scott.